In this video, I'm going to be going over how I healed my outer elbow tendon pain. But I think first it might be a good idea to briefly outline what the tendon actually does and how it works, and also how the tendon gets broken down and heals. So a tendon connects muscle to bone. It is let's say the middleman between them. So without a tendon, and if you just had muscle connecting to bone, muscle is generally quite stretchy. And when it connects to something that's so rigid, it's gonna pull the muscle and actually tear it off. So you need this middleman, whereas the tendon is quite stiff towards the bone end and then becomes a bit more stretchy towards the muscle end. The main differences between a tendon and muscle are that tendons are made up of collagen, and the fascicles in the collagen start off bigger and they get smaller and smaller and smaller, whereas the muscle is made up of more protein, actin, myosin, troponin, tropomyosin. Muscle also has a steady supply of blood flow. Tendons, however, get their nutrients when they are stretched, strained, and they expel the liquid within the tendon, and then when they come back in, they reabsorb the liquid and nutrients around the tendon, called the intracellular matrix. This supplies all the nutrients that the tendon needs to heal. However, the tendon, because it doesn't have such a steady supply of nutrients and blood flow, tends to take longer to heal than the muscle does. And that leads me to the point that tendons take longer overall to heal from damage than muscles would. Hence, if, for example, I put a big load on the tendon and I only rested 12 hours and put another big load again, the collagen fascicles are not going to be able to recover from the damage they've had. And then over time, this leads to degeneration within the tendon. With that degeneration, there's not always pain. So there's been numerous studies showing that if many people have not the best looking tendons, however, it doesn't always come with pain, or it's not accompanied by pain. So no pain is not always an indicator that the tendon is healthy. However, typically most people that run into these issues, like myself with my elbow, is lifting at a lot higher frequency than I was before, even with maybe more load. However, the total strain on the tendon rapidly jumped up from the preceding weeks. So what we want is not big peaks and then a drop a week later, maybe you take 2 weeks off, you go back to your peak again and down. That can lead to tendon problems. So you want it to be gradual and built up over time. Tendons respond really well to strain. So when the tendon's actually being pulled and strained, that's when it will adapt the best, or has shown in the Berlin study, for example, to have really good adaptations in stiffness. So that's how the tendon works, I guess, and also how it can degenerate over time. Now we know that strain is the main way that a tendon will adapt. Heavy, slow loading is going to be the best way to get tendons to adapt. That's the first thing that I learned from my elbow tendinopathy, is that when I tried to do higher volume, lighter reps, it tended not to work because I wasn't getting the right amount of strain on the tendon to actually heal it. And because I wasn't, it ended up just being irritated and actually got more painful. Now, pain can be related to a lot of other things. It's not degeneration as well. But because the strain rate wasn't high enough, I wasn't actually healing it. Even though sometimes it would feel better, even if I rested it, maybe it would feel better, but I never actually was getting the tendon stronger. How do we get enough strain on the tendon? So in the Berlin study, they found that if you applied a high strain rate, but very rapidly and fast, the tendon adaptations were far less than the group that they did 3-second isometric heavy holds with a 3-second build up and a 3-second drop off. I believe this is because the tendon needs time to be under load. And let's say you look at a tendon and the collagen fascicles in there, and the ones that are damaged, the healthy ones will take the most of the force in very fast actions. So sprinting, jumping, very fast lifting, concentrically, etc. So this means that tendons are actually, I think it's viscous. So they can be a hard substance when moving very fast. And then if the tendon is loaded slowly, it becomes more like a liquid. So it can be both. And that is why heavy, slow loading produced these benefits in the Berlin study. And that is why when we're doing our rehab for this, we want it to be slow. And it doesn't seem to matter too much whether you're doing an eccentric, so lowering the weight for 3 or 4 seconds, and then maybe it's assisted on the way up, or an isometric where you're just holding statically the position, or isotonic, so concentric, eccentric, the full rep. And you're just lifting it at a pace that's around 3 to 4 seconds on the up, and then 3 to 4 seconds on the way down. As long as the tendon is under a heavy load, and as long as it's slow enough, you're going to get that viscous nature to the tendon where it's more like a liquid. And that allows the drain of the tendon to go through the degenerated parts as well, so that they can get the stimulus to signal to your body that adaptations need to be put here, more collagen needs to be put here, and that's how you heal the tendon effectively. So in my protocol, I did do, I believe it was slow in the beginning, heavy slow rope tricep extensions. I would try neutral grip, and then I would try pronated grip. That seemed to work for a while. And then when I reflared it later, because I stopped doing this, and that is another thing to mention here, is that collagen degeneration is massive. If you take 2 or 3 weeks off from doing anything, you're gonna lose up to 80% of collagen synthesis rates in that tendon. And what that means is that we have to be consistent with our loading week to week or bi-weekly, but you can't just stop and rest. Rest does nothing and doesn't help the tendon. However, too much load too soon when the tendon's not ready, it doesn't like that. So it needs that gradual build up. And then let's say your elbow's feeling fine. My mistake was that I didn't keep loading the tendon, and I went back too quickly to other activities after stopping. So when I went back to doing my isometrics, I was looking at the Berlin method for the first time, and I was doing wrist extension holds for 3 seconds off with 4 to 5 reps. And that seemed to really help after about, felt like maybe a month of doing them. I then experimented with isotonic movements. So up and down, 3-4 seconds, up and down. That also seemed to strain the tendon well and get those same effects. But I also wanted to hit the elbow from different angles. So you have the extensors here, ulnar deviation. So seeing as I think I flared this up during dips, you're holding parallel bars so on the dips, and you're moving as you're dipping, you're doing this to stabilize. So that's how I thought that I overused, or not overused, but maybe overloaded that part of the arm where I was getting the pain from. So I'm not exactly sure which extensors I was getting it in, but I just knew I had to hit all the extensors and the ulnaris. So I did heavy ulnaris lifts or ulnaris deviation lifts. For that, I used a forearm stick you can get off Amazon. I believe mine was $30 or so. And in the meantime, while I was doing those, I still did my lifting. Pull-ups were hard to do. They could cause pain or inflammation the next day or flare up, and that's how I'd know it was too much load. I didn't gradually build it enough. So I just started with different positions of pull-ups. Under grip was great, chin-ups, and neutral grip pull-ups, as well as lat pull-downs. As I got stronger and more confident with the elbow, I would start to reintroduce pull-ups, and before you knew it, I was doing normal weighted pull-ups with no pain. After I got to that stage, I wanted to keep doing these heavy, slow isometrics or just heavy, slow strain on the tendon. And pull-ups, to an extent, do that because you are using extensors, especially pronated. So I just kept them in 1 to 2 times per week, and I still do keep them in. And sometimes the elbow does flare up, especially when I'm doing repetitive movements, and I know that I need to back off for the next couple of days. We went back to how tendons heal. I'm always leaving 48 to 72 hours between my sessions, even my heavy pulling sessions, right? So in order to summarize the process, I used heavy slow, doing 3 to 6 seconds up and down, or isometrics, 3-second holds. You can do eccentrics as well, I'm sure, with probably 3 to 5 seconds on the way down. It's up to you. You can experiment and see what works for you. Everyone's a little different. As long as you're getting a heavy and the slow part in, then you're going to be getting that gel-like, liquid-like effect on the tendon where it's stretching, and that's going to stimulate the adaptations that you want for strain in the tendon and help heal the damaged areas potentially in the tendon. And 2, I had to be smart with my loading protocols. So gradually building is better than having peaks and valleys. Like I said, tendons take a while to heal, but tendons do tend to break down quite easily, meaning that they degenerate. So you can't just not train them. They will degenerate and lose their stiffness and strength. And then when you go back to doing your heavy loading again at what you used to do, you're probably going to do a bit of damage to the tendon. It'll take a long time to heal, and if you damage again, you're going to end up with pain or more degeneration in the tendon and potentially a tendinopathy. So keep loading consistent. Maybe 2 to 3 times a week is good. Now, the third thing I also use is hydrolyzed collagen. I believe Keith Barr did studies on how that may help or benefit the tendon. And I also use just basic whey protein. So that was my journey. A lot to learn, but quite interesting when you look at the difference between tendons and muscles. It's not very often talked about, and people don't necessarily train tendons consciously. They might do it unconsciously. For example, in powerlifting, that's quite a heavy, slow movement. I could see definitely high strain rates there, but in bodybuilding, for example, it's not quite that heavy and a lot of reps. So I could see how the tendons are probably not getting the load there. And I guess the problem with that is that you run into the issue of your muscles get stronger than your tendons do over time, and you end up with this imbalance, which can lead to tendinopathies in the future. Like I said, not always. And pain, there might be no pain even with degeneration as well. So if you found this video useful at all, give it a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.